Hello there. My name is Patrick Vanderbergt. I am a Cialdini certified trainer and coach, meaning I teach people how to be ethically more persuasive using behavioral science. And I'm about to go on to the Prosperity Show, and we'll be discussing some insight in ethical persuasion that you can use immediately. We'll be talking about how to use it in a social media setting. I've got some great tips on things you should put on your website. We'll talk about raising your authority. Lots of good stuff. So make your way over, and we'll see you on the inside.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And today, we have a guest whose journey from the depths of sales frustration to the pinnacle of ethical persuasion mastery is nothing short of inspiring. Now, Patrick, hoe gaat het?
It goes well. Thank you, Prosper. How are you?
Absolutely. I was longing to say that. That's the only thing in Dutch that I can say. But obviously, I'm excited to have you on the show today. Hope you've had a great break and you're ready to help us restore sales success and also know how to persuade ethically. Yeah?
Yeah, always excited to share. So bring it on. What do you want to know?
Absolutely. For those that are watching right now, you might be surprised. Me and Patrick sort of go a long way, but you're meeting him for the very first time here. But I want you to imagine you're probably being handed a brand with a tarnished reputation and it's facing skepticism at every turn. Yet within 18 months, you actually then transform it into becoming a market leader. This is a real life story of Patrick, a certified Cialdini coach and a licensed trainer who has been personally recommended by Dr. Robert Cialdini himself. So he's coming, on this show so he can help us learn and figure out ethical persuasion, and his expertise in this field has empowered professionals and businesses worldwide to communicate more effectively, build genuine relationships, and hear more yes within their businesses, without resorting to manipulation and any kind of deceit. So many people think sales or asking people to do what you want is a form of manipulation, but there's a way that you can ethically do it, and we're going to be unfolding that on the show today. But beyond his professional accolades, Patrick is a man of diverse passions. I mean, from riding his Harley Davidson to scuba diving, and also he carries a unique perspective that is shaped by his own personal experiences and a relentless pursuit of knowledge. As you will hear from the man himself, you would notice that this is a man that knows a thing or two about what he is talking about. So today's episode, we're going to dive into Patrick's transformative journey. We're going to uncover the science behind ethical persuasion, and also we're going to explore how these principles can be seemingly integrated into your business and your personal life. So prepare to be engaged, enlightened, and also equipped with some real actionable insights that, he could well charge for, but he's happy to, deliver them with us today. Now, Patrick, I could go on and on, talking about things I'm not even qualified for. Take us maybe a little bit back to your early days as a sales rep in the scuba diving industry. What was life like then?
Yeah, well, it actually started in retail. I was working, I was at retail college. My parents had a shop in paint and wallpaper, and it's back in the Netherlands. And I wasn't so excited by paint and wallpaper, but I was excited about snorkeling and scuba diving, and eventually found my way working for a retail store selling scuba diving equipment. And I loved that. It was great, working with your passion. Passion is always good. But in relation to where I now ended up, there's been some distinctions which were really telling at the time. I remember us going to, in a retail store, you always, you want to do a good job helping people and help them find the right products. But I remember this specific scenario, this situation where we went to a trade show, or to the public, and all the dive shops were there, and they're they had specials on, and you buy tanks and regulators and dive suits and all that sort of stuff. And we had on our tables, we had a display cabinet with watches, and normally they were, it was guilders back then, but let's say they were 200 euros normally, and they were on special for 125. Quite a sharp price. And so we had displayed them all very nicely in the display cabinet, but sales weren't really happening, right? They were just sitting there, and it was just one of the things that wasn't moving. And I remember our boss, could be at multiple stores, and I didn't meet this person that much, an older gentleman, and he went to this cabinet and he opened it up and he said, "Give me another 12 or so." And so I gave him some watches, and he just threw them on top, right? We had made it all nice and neat, and now he made it look messy. And he closed the cabinet. And I remember thinking, how much sense did that make, right? As in, it was displayed so nicely, these beautiful watches, right?
Yes.
And you could have pushed me over with a feather. Within half an hour, these watches were starting to sell. Why is that? Right? Now I understand why that works. My boss at the time obviously knew this was going to work, and we would call that a tactic, right? You do a certain something because it produces a result, but you don't actually know why it produces a result. And I don't know if he actually knew why it produced that result, but it did, right? And so we did that. Make it look messy, you sell more watches. Now, of course, I understand that this is the principle of social proof that was brought to the surface. We'll get into that later, but one of the principles of ethical persuasion is that people follow the leads of comparable other people, especially when they're numerous, when they're similar to us, and when we are uncertain, right? We do what other people do. We follow the crowd. And so the watches, all displayed nice and neatly, looked like a cabinet of watches that nobody was buying. Where once they started to look messy, as in, it looked like we didn't have enough time to restock these things and display them nicely. We just kept putting more and more on top. Well, this must be a special that people are buying. And as a result, that happened. So this fascinated me to no end. And then, anyway, not knowing the science, fast forward probably 10 years or something, and now I'm in Australia. I was a sales rep for a wholesaler in scuba diving equipment, and I was able to pick up additional brands, and I had done that at the time. And my employer, they wanted to improve how their business was going, and good for them, they engaged a business consultant to help them, which is great, because then you get an outside perspective and take yourself to the next level. It's always good to have some coaching. And with this business coach, I was lucky. The business coach was based in Australia, and he was giving us strategies to use and teaching us things as in us sales reps to increase our interaction with our clients. And he said, listen, Patrick, if you ever got any questions with implementing some of these strategies, we're just in Vermont, right? I know you're in Ferntree where I was at the time. If you want, give me a ring, drop on by. Well, I don't know, Prosper, how many Dutch people you've ever met or on holidays, but there is this thing you have to be aware of, right? If you invite a Dutch person, they turn up, right? If you go, oh, so lovely to meet you out here in Egypt, right? If you're ever in Melbourne, right? They come. Anyway, so did I, right? So here's a business coach inviting me to come to his place and discuss a few things. Well, I can see the value in that, right? So I did. And so he, nowadays you can buy educational audio programs for, $20 on online sites and very, very cheap. But back then, right, to buy a set of 12 CDs from Brian Tracy, I mean, you were paying $1,200, right? And so he was lending me these sorts of sets of information. And so besides learning what I was learning from him, one of the things that made into my hot little hands was this series of cassette tapes from this event in Los Angeles called Mind Capture. Dr. Cialdini was one of the speakers there on 2 cassettes. So I was listening to that in my rolling university, the car, right, with cassette player. And it blew me away because whilst I was working hard as a sales rep, and I think I was doing genuinely a good job by my retailers, I was investing a lot of time, I don't think I was really getting the return that amount of effort should be bringing. Maybe that's a little bit cocky, but I think a lot of us feel like that, right? We get a request. I spoke to an architect recently, right? And he says, I don't understand it, right? I make these, they come and ask me for a building, and I make 3 designs for them, and I do the necessary research in terms of materials, that sort of stuff, but I go deeper and I put even more effort in, right? And I do all this work to give them a proposal no other architect would ever give them, right? And still they're moving to my competitor, right? Or somebody who was a little bit cheaper. And so a lot of us are a bit frustrated. And often, now that I'm in this, you often have a feeling that, am I doing it right? Right? When you're sending that email out, as in, was this the right idea to send this communication out? Is this going to convince them to see my point of view or to do as I ask? And just to have a little reality check, ethical persuasion is not exclusively for business. It works privately as well. As in, you can communicate with your children in a way that strengthens the relationship and increases the chances that they will listen to you, clean up their room, do their homework, that sort of stuff. But anyway, so I was learning this information from Dr. Cialdini, and I really loved it. And at the time, I took on the representation of an additional brand, a brand of dry diving suits. So it seals on your neck and your wrists, and only your head and your hands get wet, and the rest of you stays nice and tasty warm. Right. This brand called Hot and Dry still exists. And they had an amazing suit. Now, I've used those types of suits back in the Netherlands when I was in the military, also recreationally. But there's many different styles of these suits. And I haven't been in touch with them for a very long time, but their suit was the best dry diving suit I'd had ever experienced. There was an inner suit which you could fix like the inner tube of a bicycle tire. So if you had a leak, you could fix it in 5 minutes and you're back in the water. And it was protected by an outer suit, like an overall. Sort of simplicity itself, but very, very clever. But they had a problem. The year before I took it on, they changed the manufacturer of the inner membrane material. And it was sort of a nylon and a watertight coating, and this coating let go, it delaminated. And so they sold many dry diving suits to lots of divers in Australia, and all of them came back. They all leaked. And so they all had to be replaced. Disaster. And so this is when I take on this brand, because the old rep was retiring. And so I'm entering retail, my retailers that I knew so well, right? And I said, well, exciting. I've picked up representation from Hot and Dry. And some of them laughed at me. I said, what? Cold and steamy, right? They had a nickname for it, for goodness sake. And so,
all kinds of the links, right?
exactly. And so, so I'm confronted with, wow, I have got what I think is an awesome product, but nobody wants to touch it. And so, anyway, make a long story short, I went through what Dr. Cialdini was teaching, and I implemented as best as I could. And I was lucky at the time because I had this business coach, John McDonald's. I hope he's still around. I was sort of able to bounce my ideas off him instead of trying to interpret all the stuff myself. But I implemented as best as I could. And as you pointed out in this lovely introduction, 18 months later, we were market leader, which was an impressive feat. But it was also delightful to use it and create a strong relationship with the retailers, and at the same time also the divers who were delighted with the purchase. So that's how it sort of all started. Is that where you wanted to know?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for taking us, through all that, because it just really gives us, a bigger picture of the person that, is in front of us. Now, I was laughing when you mentioned that never invite a Dutchman to anything, because I clearly remember when you showed up to our networking event at like 6 a.m, and I'm like, whoa, you drove all the way. So now that makes sense, what you went on, what you did and what you mean there. So you took over this brand. I mean, obviously, like you said, they already had nicknames in the marketplace. What was that? Wet and Steamy. And that's not something that anyone would have wanted, especially if you're diving, you're under the water and your suit is actually collecting water. I would think it would actually make you drown, or, just really mess up with, the thermals inside. What is it then that you went on and did that was different? Because the trust for that brand had already been tarnished. What did you implement, and how did you apply the ethical persuasion principles to this damaged brand that you started seeing, significant turnaround?
Sure. So I think this is probably the point where I need to explain a little bit about human decision making before we dive into, some of these pretty simple to understand and typically costless to implement strategies, but you need to understand what's behind it. So when it comes to decision making, Daniel Kahneman, who was a Nobel Prize winner, professor in psychology and behavioral scientist, he died last year. He figured out, or he explained, that when it comes to decision making, your brain, the brain of your audience, as in your children, your spouse, your potential client, your existing clients, there's two parts to our decision-making brain. We have system 1 and system 2. This is not like left and right brain. System 1 is like the intuitive brain, right? It works very fast. It's an unconscious process, and it happens automatically. And system 1 uses shortcuts to make decisions. Let's say you want to buy a front door for your house. And so you're in the hardware store, you're looking at a number of front doors, you can spend $200, $400, $700, and you know nothing about door construction, right? Other than, well, this is a pretty door, that's about where your knowledge ends. You don't know about construction, timber types, glass types, varnishes, paints that are used on this door. You've got no idea, really. Now, you have a decision to make. Now, one decision could be that you go to the library and you start reading books, right? And maybe 3 months later, you start doing some workshops on door construction. And then 5 months later, you would be in perfect shape to go to that hardware store and make your decision on which door to buy. But what are the chances you'll do that? What are the chances you have that time for that? very little, right? So something in the back of your mind might go, hang on a second, expensive equals good, right? Most of the time, if I spend more money on something, I get something of better quality, lasts me longer, better suited to purpose, right? That is true most of the time. And so that has become a shortcut for us. Instead of saying, I'm going to research doors to the nth degree, one shortcut you might choose to take is that, well, hang on a second. If I buy the cheapest one, maybe, but if I spend a little bit more, if I buy the $400 door, it's probably a better door for me. And you'd probably be right most of the time. And that's why that shortcut is attractive. It allows you to make a quicker, easier decision. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because our brain is always wanting to conserve whatever calories it's got in there, so without expending a lot of energy. So yeah, shortcuts like that.
Yeah, so it allows us to make a quick and easy decision. Great. Now, those shortcuts are right most of the time, but inevitably they're also wrong sometimes. Sometimes you spend more money on something, it's still rubbish, right? So system one, we say, is error prone, right? It sometimes makes mistakes, but it does allow for a quick decision-making process. All right, so that's system one. Then we've got system two. So system two is our logical, rational brain, right? This is a conscious process. It takes a lot of effort, it goes slowly, and we use this for complex decisions. Right, so the picture I painted of going to the library and researching, right, getting all the available information, so then I can sit down and contemplate all the facts that I know to come up with a reliable decision, right? It's a very reliable part for our decision-making process, but it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. And so Daniel Kahneman figures out in 2002 that 90% of our decisions are made by system one. Later research, validated by other studies, says that that's 95% now. And so, well, hang on, a couple of questions, right? I mean, goodness, how many decisions can you make on autopilot? That's quite surprising, right? Only 5% you would use system two for. And then often people say, well, hang on a second, that maybe for everyday decisions you would use system one. But if it's serious, well, I pay proper attention, right? I research it to the nth degree. Let's say buying a house, right? So if you buy a house, you go online, you figure out what suburb you want to live in, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how big the garage needs to be, how far is it from the school, from the children, what are the VCE scores from the schools, when they get older? How is the value of this suburb behaving in terms of other suburbs, right? You might go to open for inspections, you might have an Excel spreadsheet, right? This house, this address, what we liked, right? And all the features and things. But how many times have you bumped into something that just bought a house, maybe a friend of yours, and they say something along the lines of, well, it was a bit above the budget, but we just loved the place, right? Had to buy it. That's not a logical decision, right? Lots of work was done by system two, but when decision-making time came, system one took over, right? There were other decision triggers involved. And so this leads us to a realization that what most of us in sales are doing, but this doesn't just apply to sales, it applies to any convincing you're doing of other people. Doesn't matter if that's sales, advertising, human resources, PR, marketing. It doesn't matter if you're trying to get the bills paid on time because you're in the admin team, right? You're also trying to convince people to pay their bills on time. Your children, the school board, the council, the government, right? Wherever you're trying to get your point of view across, you rely on your ability to be persuasive. And so when we think about, how am I going to convince someone? We use system 2, right? Now we're using our full brain power to come up with something. How am I going to convince the other person? And our system 2 tends to come up with information, facts that would appeal to system 2, the logical, rational part of the brain, right? That's why if you go and look at websites of businesses, brochures, communications, emails, it is typically filled with logic and reason, all the reasons why logically this is a good proposal that you should accept, right? All arguments designed by system 2 to appeal to system 2, but system 2 is not in control anymore. System 1. And so when we start raising information to the surface that qualifies as a shortcut, we make it easier for our audience to make a yes decision. If it's in their favor to say yes, right? If what you have, they don't need, don't want, well, you're not going to get a yes, but you're increasing the likelihood of a yes. And that can often be very substantial, the difference. I mean, you can imagine, right? If you are constantly talking to a part of the brain that's now in charge of only 5%, and now you start talking to the part of the brain that's in charge of 95%, right? There's a decent ratio, which is not not that outlandish. So that's what I started doing with the dry suits, right? So there's the shortcut information that I mentioned. Dr. Cialdini identified from now nearly 100 years worth of research that there's 7 universal principles of persuasion. And some of these words you've heard, and some of them you know how they work. But people tend to not understand how to sort of activate them to get them to start working. And then they certainly don't tend to know how to amplify them, how to get them to work better. And so, so for example, reciprocity is one of the principles of persuasion, right? We have a tendency, or a need really, to give back to other people the same type of behavior that was first given to us, right? And the reason we have this tendency is because all societies train their members to do not take without giving in return, right? If you were a kid and somebody, some kid gave you a candy, or grandma did something nice for you, right? Then mom and dad would go, oh, wasn't that nice of grandma? What are we going to do for grandma, right? We have very nasty names for people that take without giving in return. And so we go to great, I see you smiling there. Did I strike a chord?
Oh yeah, no, there's names, people that are stingy, or people that people that just don't give back, even in our sort of space, give us gain. The more you give, the more you, okay.
Exactly. So, right. So we give back the same type of behavior that's first given to us. So we want to be the first to give, right? To get that relationship going. And reciprocity is a good relationship builder, as it turns out. So what we're doing with these retailers, I thought, how can I help them genuinely in this situation, right? Well, most people I mean, things might have changed a little bit now, but back then, certainly people who had scuba diving retail stores, they were not there because they were brilliant business people. They had a shop because they loved diving, right? And so when it came to selling, that didn't necessarily work so well. So I offered to do dry suit trials. So I would turn up with 10, 12 dry suits, and we would organize a swimming pool, and they would organize some gear, and we would invite their members or clients, and we'd go to the swimming pool, and they could try out these suits. And so towards my retailer, that was quite a gift, that I would turn up and basically run this evening for them, right? Donating my time. For the clients, this was also an experience because they didn't have to pay for it, right? So they were learning something, even if they weren't going to buy a suit, right? They experienced it. So that is something where I'm doing something nice for you, and so you feel like you owe me something, right? It's the old piece of cheese, right? When we were kids, we go into the supermarket and there'd be somebody there with a tray of cheese, right?
Mm.
And we try a piece of cheese, and people that now when you go to the supermarket, they're still there, right? So one of two things: there's either an enormous surplus of cheese over the last 40 years, or it works, right? But most people think if I take that piece of cheese, that's not going to change my behavior. But it does. Research is very clear, right? You give something, people give back. What I find hilarious is that let's say if you try a piece of cheese or a piece of candy or a bit of honey or a bit of yogurt or whatever it is, and you hate it, doesn't matter. You buy more of something else, right? And so when you do something nice for someone, they want to give back. So that builds that relationship, and increases the chances that they want to work with you. So there's reciprocity, real quick. Liking, the principle of liking means, or the rule is that we like to do business with people that we like. Well, it's not rocket science. But most sales training will teach you that if you're trying to sell me your services, then you should do what you can so that I like you. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the most powerful. Think about it. If you're trying to convince me to use your services, it's nice if I like you, but it would be better if I got the feeling that you genuinely liked me, right? Because even if I don't quite like you, if I feel you really like me, I'm still safe, right? Because if you like me, you're going to look after me.
Mm.
So we should genuinely come to appreciate our audience, which you can do by doing some homework, right? Trying to figure out where people are from, or, if you have similar interests. And so I used to do that. But the other thing of liking is similarities, right? People like people that are like them. So I would ask, the people in the dive shop, they used to be, or typically dive instructors, which I was as well. So we had something similar. That's why you like each other more. You know how you meet somebody in the street and you go, oh, hang on, you grew up in the same city as me, right? All of a sudden you have this familiarity towards each other. Big smile on your face. You can have that with anybody, provided you figure out what you have in common. Anyway, so with the divers that were there, I would ask where they're from, right? So if it was an event we ran in Melbourne, well, then I'm a Melburnian like you.
Right.
Right. And if I was in Adelaide, right, well, then I'm a diver like you. Right. And of course, if somebody had anything resembling a Dutch last name, well, I'm Dutch like you. Right. All genuine pieces of information that people like each other more. And actually, I've got a little bit of research on there. There was a study done by one of my colleagues, Dr. Neidert, between Northwestern and Stanford, and they were negotiating acquisitions of companies, difficult negotiations. And they were doing that negotiation exclusively via email. And 30% of the negotiations would end up in deadlock. And so the negotiators were recommended that, listen, before you start getting into business, share some information about yourself. What do you like to do? What's your background? What food do you like? What restaurants do you go to? What hobbies do you have? Do you have children? Do you have boy, girl, right? Share whatever you want to share. And it turned out that once they did that, share personal information with each other, and then went into negotiating these very complicated situations, deadlocks dropped from 30% to 6%. Now, what was interesting is that it wasn't the amount of information that was shared, It was the similarities. How many similarities? The more similarities, the more it worked. Does that make sense?
Right. So in a sense, you're saying people like us do things like this. So if the person is a Harley Davidson rider, even though it's not going to be implied in the negotiation, but the fact that I know you ride a Harley, then I know there's that one aspect that connects us. And obviously, if you like that, then you must be like me. Then you must think like me, or that could be the human psychology behind that. Then.
It's not rocket science. It's simple enough. But so instead of rushing in as, oh great, you're here, let me tell you everything about this car, this TV, this insurance policy, first discuss something personal. Now, for a lot of people, this is something they always do, and that's great. That's very persuasive, right? So did we before we started. How did you go? Did you have a nice weekend? Right, we had a little bit of a chat.
And I said 100, and
That's right. You made an effort, right? So you want to do that with other people. You want to, and the first time you meet someone, you need to spend more time on this. And in subsequent meetings, you need to raise that liking back to the surface, just by touching on it. So when you talk to somebody and they say, "Oh goodness, I just love cheesecake," right? Make a note. Right? And 3 months from now, when you connect with them again, remember, right? Did you enjoy any nice cheesecake? We had a beauty 4 weeks ago, right? Big smile, and we're back there, right? Your system too, your logical brain will tell you that building a relationship takes weeks, months, years. That's system 2 thinking. System 1 can build a bond in as little as 15 minutes, right? And that can have a massive impact on your outcome. KPMG, right? Big accounting firm, right? I think one of the top 4 in the world. They did a research study amongst their own account managers. And they used a complex algorithm to figure out what's your relationship like with your clients, right? And so they identified weak, average, and strong relationships. Then they looked at how successful are you in getting agreements signed, as in getting to, I guess, work with us for another year, let's say. If they had weak relationships, they had 30% success. If it was an average strength relationship, they had 45% success. And if they had a strong relationship, they had a 70% compliance. That's more than double. And there's other studies that also say if you've got a strong relationship with people, you can double your outcome. We're not talking 5 or 6%. This can have a big impact.
Right. Now, obviously, the person that's watching this and listening to this, and I really appreciate this because, you're citing all the studies and, putting proof to everything else that, you do know. But how does the average business person make use of all this information? And, let's maybe use LinkedIn as a platform where somebody could be wanting to connect with their audience at scale. How do you put this into practice?
Okay, so the idea is in the 7 principles, and of course it's hard to touch on all of that today. But every principle has like probably a dozen different applications, right? So it's all easy enough to understand, but the trick is, the hard part of it is to get into that confidence and have the application skills to recognize where this is in the situation, to then bring it to the surface. That's all you need to do. You just need to make people aware of it. And so, you say LinkedIn. So, well, if you're trying to reach out to people that have never heard of you before, you've got no relationship, right? And so reciprocity, as I just told, is a good relationship builder, right? So what do people do when they post things on LinkedIn? Well, they're hoping that that post is successful, right? So what makes it successful? Well, more likes and longer than a sentence comments, right? I learned that recently. Don't know how much truth there is to it, but if you write 3-4 words, it's nice. But when it's like, let's say 2 sentences or something, that really counts as, hey, there's a discussion going on. It's not just a compliment. There's some interaction going on.
Yeah, you made an effort. I mean, if you sit there for long enough, then that person actually means you took your time, read that. So I can see the reciprocity in that, because when people post, it just feels like you're posting into the oblivion. But if somebody actually sat back and read, 2, 3 sentences, actually is a sign for that. So I like that.
Yeah. So what you could do, let's say you're trying to, I don't know, you're trying to get hold of some director in some company you're trying to connect with. Well, you can follow what they put out and you can start interacting, right? As in, like what they send out with genuine compliments, or, comment about their post to make that more successful. They'll probably start talking back to you, right? Oh, thank you for your comment or something like that. Now, let's say you do that for a number of weeks, a couple of weeks, maybe even. The fact that at that point you might ask to connect with someone, right? And people in higher places, certainly if you don't have a service that everybody needs, they tend to not be so eager to connect with everybody, because of course then messages come, right? I get that as well. You allow somebody to come in, and 2 days later you got, we have a wonderful service. Can we send you right? And then I can't help myself. I text back, so, does this work for you? You're not using any science, right? Let's talk about it. Right. So, but let's say 2 weeks later or 4 weeks later, after you've genuinely helped them to make their posts better by putting comments in, by putting likes in, the chances that they'll accept your connection request will be significantly higher than if they would be if you just send a message straight out. Does that make sense?
Because now maybe you've also helped them with the liking aspect of persuasion, because now they think if you like their posts, then that means you must like them as a person, and people like or favor those that are nice or cordial to them. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there would certainly be an element of that in there, but the biggest thing would be reciprocity, as in, you're being nice to me, or you have been nice to me. Now I need to be nice to you, right? So that'll increase the chance that they'll connect with you. Now let's talk about making posts on social media. Now you can put up a quote, right? It might get some engagement. You could sing your own praises, how wonderful and great you are. Or you could share something that is educational, that somebody might learn something from, right? And I'm sure you do that, a lot of your posts as well, right? As in, this is something you should know if you want to accomplish this. I do the same on my LinkedIn feed, right? I try to make 80% of my posts, you'll be learning something from that if you watch the video or read what I actually wrote. So thereby you're giving away expertise, advice, also your time, right? And that is also something that you're giving away. And so it's again like a piece of cheese, right? The emotional bank account goes out. And so next time you come with a request, maybe that request is, hey, we've got a webinar on, come join us, right? You'll be empowered by the fact that an emotional bank account is out, because you've given nice pieces of information. And so your webinar...
Not only that, but and thank you so much for that. I just wanted to clarify on that, because once you start giving out information, people are not going to know until you tell them what it is that you know. All right, you might be an expert, but if people don't know what you're an expert in and how that helps them, that will be very, very difficult. So you want to give more, and like you then say, if you then call upon and say, now come to a webinar, in the person's mind, they're thinking to themselves, if you've been giving this much for free, can you imagine what it is that you're going to be giving us when it's in that particular sort of space? So you're not only, yes, like you say, you're giving emotional, bank balance out, but also you're literally teaching people what it is that you do, which makes it easy for you to then convert a little bit later on. I like, that thing that you just said there. So sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. And you bring up another point. So you say, okay, you could be giving great advice, but if they don't know you, right, then you're lacking somewhere else. And where you're lacking is authority, which is one of the other principles, right?
Mm.
You have credentials, you have reasons why you're good at what you do, as in not you, prosperity, anybody, right? All of us in business have our own expertise. But to get that to go across to someone, for them to realize that is not that easy, as it turns out, right? I mean, you've seen your share of presentations, right? Somebody's introduced, oh, here we have Michael. How long have you been part of this organization? What's your favorite animal, right? And then they start talking, and then the first or the second slide, they got all their credentials on the slide, and they start explaining, well, I've been in this industry for 15 years. I've got a master's degree in this. I've got a certificate in that, and I've got this award and that award from such and such, right? Basically saying, let me explain the 35 reasons why you should listen to me, right? And we do that because we're trying to, right? We have this expertise, and we think if you know about my expertise, you will take my words, my recommendation with the gravity that they deserve, right? And that's why you're standing there singing your own praises. But what research shows is that when you do that, the subconscious goes, you're full of yourself, right? You lose on authority and you lose on liking. It's lose-lose, right? You cannot sing your own praises. You need to introduce your credentials at other moments that are socially acceptable. And one of them is before you meet, right? That's why it's good to send somebody a letter of introduction before you meet them, right? So if you're meeting with this board of directors, or you're meeting with a person on Zoom to take them through a proposal or something, you would bungle away natural persuasion if you didn't send them a little PDF, right? And you write an email, I'm really excited to see you next Wednesday at 10:30. I have attached a little bit of background information about myself. I hope you take a couple of minutes to peruse that information. It'll explain and you'll understand more where I'm coming from with this. Right? Now, that is socially acceptable. You are not considered boastful. And now it raises your authority. But how do you do that on a social media post? Right? A little tricky. So in a way, it is also a nonverbal communication. If you made a video and you go, well, let me tell you the 25 reasons why I'm so fantastic. Wrong, right? You damaged yourself. But you can raise your authority in other ways. So awards that you've earned are a wonderful source of authority, right? Just yesterday, I'm talking to somebody in a service industry, and I look on their website, and that's a whole other cool discussion, right? The bit on a website that you see without scrolling, that's called above the fold, right? You'd like to think that everybody scrolls down your site, right? They'll look at what loads up, and that might already be enough to decide to click away, right? And so any pieces of information that appeal to the automatic decision-making part of the brain, right? That 95% part of the brain, some of that needs to be above the fold, right? And so I'm on this website of this lady, very successful in her field, and successful is making money and being busy, right? But that doesn't mean that there's not lots of success to just falling through the cracks because you're not actually communicating in a way that you get the successes that were really yours. And so I'm going down this website, and there's nothing persuasive above the fold. I see that so many times. And then I go down the list, and then there's a video, right? A 2-minute video of who we are and the service that we provide. And it's all, we're so good, we're so wonderful, right? And logic, right? We have, we do this and we make sure we pay special attention, all this sort of stuff. It's all great. It's all system 2 information. One piece of information in a 2-minute video actually appealed to the automatic decision-making part of the brain. She said, if you don't use our services, you'll be wasting a lot of time. That's scarcity, right? People are twice as motivated by the potential of losing something than to gain the exact same thing, right? Look at your brochures, right? Look at your website. What are you talking about with your services? What people gain. Use us and you'll have more of this. You'll get, it goes faster, right? All this gain language, where if you spoke about it from a loss perspective, you'd be twice as persuasive with that. Anyway, so I'm scrolling down this website, and down the bottom of the website, there's this thing that she's got this award for something. Down the bottom of the website, that should be on the top. And then I look back at her email, and on her email signature, as there should be, she's got 5 of these awards on her email signature. They should all be above the fold, right? Because when you load up a website, you go, ooh, right? If other people who know their stuff, like the association of such and such, they got an award from, and the council on blah, 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 right? Whatever these awards are from, if they recognize this person as knowing what they're doing, then I can't go too far wrong interacting with this company as well. That's my shortcut, right? If an expert says so, well, they know better than me, right? We follow the expertise. So in a social, to make our way back there, if you're trying to set out a post, it's you don't want to use all these principles at the same time, right? Imagine a billboard, right? And you're trying to put a testimonial from a customer up there, which is social proof, which is one of the principles. You're trying to give a tip, which would be reciprocity, and you're trying to put all the awards that you want up there, right? Can you imagine being on the highway, right? You wouldn't have the time, right? It'd be a very full billboard. Yeah. So also, if you put too much of it, it doesn't feel nice anymore. So in one post, you might share some valuable information. And in another post, you might share a testimonial, right? That's social proof. And in another post, you might share an award that you won, or the opinions of a genuine expert in your field. So it doesn't even need to be you, right? If you're, I don't know, you sell widgets, right? You've got an expert that says, well, widgets have been out of fashion for a while, but it is the business tool to have right now, right? If it's genuine information from an expert, that is also persuasive, and it raises your authority because you're saying the same as the genuine expertise. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for obviously really opening that up, because so many people find it hard to know what exactly to post and how to put it across to people, so that they're not necessarily leading with their features, but the future that their customer wants to experience, and also without overwhelming them with so much context. You're speaking about a billboard. I once drove past a billboard. I don't know if that was done on purpose, but I failed to understand the logic of it. There was a whole thing about it, but there was a button on there that says click here, or something like apply now, and it was a button, and I'm like, how are people thinking, when it comes to things like that? But if somebody masters all this, Patrick, and has an understanding of how to use all the, influence tips above the fold and persuasion strategies and things of that nature, isn't there a risk of people going above, or because to whom much is given, much is required? How do you then ensure that these persuasion techniques that are teaching are being used ethically and not as tools of manipulation? Because if people know what works, why wouldn't they multiply the use case of that?
Yeah. And thanks for bringing that up, because I'd love to elaborate on that. So, yeah, persuasion science can be used unethically, right? Let me give you an example. You work in a shoe shop, and somebody comes in and they're looking at this, I don't know, purple pair of shoes, and you got 12 more of those in that size in the back room, right? But you tell that customer, you know what? This, just so you know, this is the last pair we have in this color, in this size at the moment, and we won't be able to get more for another 3 weeks. Now, if you're looking for purple shoes to wear to that party tonight or next weekend, it might not be the pair you would shop maybe a little bit further, right? But upon hearing that this is the last pair, chances are you're going to take it, right? And you walk out of the store, and 5 minutes later, this salesperson goes to the back room, grabs the next pair, and puts that in the store, right? That would be unethical use of persuasion. It does work, but research shows that it is short-term win, long-term disaster, because you get found out. And more so now than in the past, right? With digital, social media, it's so easy to, goodness, if we look at our leading supermarket chains, right? How many videos are there of them putting a sales sticker on sale with the same price that's on the normal sticker that's underneath, right? Lots of people go out of their way when they discover it, they make a video about it, right? And that circulates. I've seen MPs in Canberra making their videos commenting about this behavior of the supermarkets, right? It has a damaging effect to their brand. And so by using persuasion science unethically, the ramifications can be large, right? It can damage your personal reputation and it can damage the brand. There's also, Dr. Cialdini did some research on that with Dr. M.E.D.I.A, I believe. And they uncovered that there's 3 tumors related to the unethical use of persuasion, tumors that grow within an organization, right? First of all, most people, it doesn't sit well with us to act unethically. It does something to us. It tells us that I can't achieve anything. I can't win without lying, right? And so that brings a stress on us. And in organizations where they encourage people to do unethical behavior, for example, there'll be more sick leave, right? They're health-wise, they're not doing as well. Second tumor is that people, because they don't like being in that situation, the staff turnover is larger. To hire someone and train them, that costs a lot of money. And so when you turn over your staff quicker than you need to, that in itself is a massive cost. And the third tumor is that there are people that don't mind doing unethical behavior. And that's a very different person, right? The unethical type of person, right? And so they are also unethical with the business, right? They do deals on the sides and they steal customers and take stationery home, that sort of stuff. So unethical use of persuasion is short-term win maybe, but long-term disaster. We are significantly better off using it ethically, which is great, right? And that's why we bring that to the forefront. You don't have to be uncomfortable with using this, right? If you went into a store and they had a television for sale, and it was on sale, and you looked at it, and it was nice, you like it, you think you'll buy it, but I might go and have a coffee with my partner, and then we'll come back, right? Let's say that's the picture. Now, let's say that is genuinely the last TV they've got in that store, right? Would you want the salesperson to tell you that? When you say, well, yeah, I do really like it, we're going to have a little cup of coffee, and we're going to have a little think about it, and then we'll come back. Would you want them to tell you it's the last one?
Well, obviously, because if you come back and it's gone, then, yeah.
That's right? You'd be pissed off, right? If you had a little coffee and you came back an hour later, it's okay, yeah, great, we're going to get it. And then they go, oh, sorry, it was the last one and somebody else bought it. Now you'd be upset with the salesperson, right? So by raising this type of information to the surface, as long as it's genuine, you don't mind, right? And that's why it strengthens relationships and it builds loyalty, which is another lovely side of it. Another side, which is sort of brings up as well, is that if you know more about this, you can also, you can realize when it's used on you unethically, right? Most of us have fallen victim to, unethical approaches of persuasion. There's always one that jumps to my mind. Maybe this has happened to you. We've just discussed, right? Reciprocity. I do something nice for you, you do something nice for me, right? I'm in a big shopping center and there's a little, there's little display, there's little stores that have some tables in the middle of the aisle and you walk past with your shopping, right? And so this is a little pop-up shop with beauty products and that sort of stuff. So as I'm sort of, I'm sort of having high pace, I'm racing to get to the car or the next shop, can't remember. And so the girl goes, she has this tiny little satchel, right, with 2 cents worth of facial cream or something in it, right? And so she goes, this is for you, right? And so, oh, right, thank you. And so I grab it in my stride, right? And as I grab it, she goes, can I ask you a question? And I feel my feet stopping, right? Why did I stop? I wouldn't have stopped. Well, I mean, I'm naturally so pretty. I don't need beauty products, right? But, right? But I wouldn't otherwise have stopped, right? But she gave me something, piece of cheese, right? And I could feel the stopping power. I'll never forget it. I said, can I ask you a question? And because I know how reciprocity works and the strength of it, I realized, hang on a second, you're using this little satchel exactly to produce this result. And so I said, you know what? I got to go somewhere, but you can keep this. And I gave the satchel back, right? And so by knowing more about this, you can also protect yourself more against unethical use. So, if somebody is inventing compliments and they don't know anything about you, they're trying to invoke liking, right? Social proof, testimonials, right? Everybody is collecting testimonials for their business, right? As we should. That's good. And I'm delighted to see that, right? That's one of the principles, social proof. But testimonials are the most abused and falsified piece of information that businesses use, right? People write their own testimonials. They delete bad ones or that sort of stuff. Now with Google, that's a little harder. But when you read a testimonial and you're dubious about the source, that can also then relinquish its power. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I really like how you're dispelling this, because so many people might go and buy the book or go and do the courses, learn all they're learning, and then want to use it against other people, and usually never pans out well. You just got to do the right thing. Now, for those that obviously have been inspired by this, your journey and what it is that you've got to offer, which I know is a great deal, and are eager to maybe learn more, what sort of resources or maybe the next steps that you recommend that they take in order for them to begin their transition?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. So, this is a fun thing to learn. I hope this was a fun thing to listen to. Some of these principles, it's all simple stuff to understand, really. It's not rocket science. The difficult part is recognizing what it is you're trying to persuade. It's not actually the goal you're trying to achieve. It's a behavior you're trying to change. And identifying it in the situation. So learning at any level is good, but something we do need to realize is that and this is also, we're talking about the 90% and the 95%. This is also tightening up. There was a sociologist called Herman Ebbinghaus in 1885, and he studied if I learn a new piece of information, how long does it last, right? If I don't do anything with it, how long do I retain it? Well, he found that he lost 90% of new information in 30 days. Nowadays, that's a week, right? So while doing a course is good, right? Attending a webinar is nice and doing a keynote is nice. Chances are 7 days later, you've lost 90% of what you've experienced. And I know we've all done this, right? You've been to a seminar, you got a sore wrist from writing, you got a whole notebook full of good stuff. And 2 months later, you look back at it and you go, well, how much am I actually using? And it's probably only a couple of things, right? So I've got some free learning materials that I'll make available to everybody, and I'd be delighted to see you take advantage of it. But you have to realize that there is this forgetting curve that you're dealing with. So if you read a book, right, by the time you get to the end of the book, if it takes you longer than a week, you've already lost 90% of what was in the beginning. So, with sort of free stuff, it's great to inspire you. Hopefully you'll get some things out of it. You actually start using it, but the chances are you only use a small part of it. And so the best way to learn is to do a longer tracked program. We teach something over 8 weeks, which people can ask me about if they want. The information that I've got that people can access, if you go to my website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au/community, maybe a slash again, that takes you to a page where you can get access to my online community where people can ask questions. There's also posts that people can look at and learn from. And part of that access, you get access to a Persuasion Power course by Dr. Cialdini, which runs over 7 segments. And so you learn insights like I've shared with you today. And our flagship training that runs over 8 weeks, there's trial access to that, to the first 3 modules, which discuss contrast, which is a very powerful and easy to use principle in relation to how you order your proposals. And it's Dr. Cialdini in there teaching you that. So you'll have access to that. So just go to ethicalpersuasion.com.au/community and you can give yourself access to that. And if you've got any questions, reach out or connect to me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, I can't thank you enough for sharing your incredible journey and invaluable insights with us today. I think we should bring you back because I know there's quite a lot. Even just going through the 7 principles alone, would be something that would be of value to a lot of people, because each and every one of them, the reciprocity, the authority, the scarcity, all of those things really blend into our daily lives. And if we can use them, I believe we can do and have, a happier existence. So thank you so much for taking your time, and maybe next time, meet in person again and have more discussions around this.
That'd be great. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching right now, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into the world of ethical persuasion, be sure to check out Patrick's book, How to Hear Yes More Often. I'll be putting all those links in the show notes, and also the links to the community where you will have free persuasion lessons from Dr. Cialdini himself. And also there's a lot of resources available around ethical persuasion. So I'll put all those links in the show notes so that you can get started on your journey. And I want you to remember that the power to transform your communication and influence ethically is literally within your reach, and all these resources are available for you. I really encourage you to also subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show so you do not miss out on enlightening conversations like this, because together we can actually continue to learn, grow, and prosper. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.